Dear friends, welcome to this 247th online gathering for faith leaders across the country, now called Creating Beloved Community. This regular gathering is sponsored by ELCA's coaching ministry. Yay! I'm Solveig Nilsson Gooden. I use she, her pronouns. I'm honored to be one of your facilitators today.
I am Jason O'Neill. I use any and all pronouns, and I am humbled to be your other facilitator today. In attunement with the truth and healing movement of the ELCA and moving toward right relationship with our Indigenous siblings and neighbors, let us begin with a land acknowledgement. We are gathered together from all parts of Turtle Island, also referred to as North America. We are connected by the breath given us by the breath maker and by the very peace of Mother Earth, the land that each of us inhabits today. We understand that all land is Indigenous land, and we invite each of you to name in the chat the Indigenous peoples or tribal nations whose lands you occupy now. We also acknowledge the terror of colonialism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, broken treaties, stolen land, forced removal, and boarding schools, as well as the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and children each year, and the ripple effects of violence still being experienced today. We know that Indigenous peoples are not historical subjects, but are part of our communities, and they offer invaluable wisdom for how we exist in relationship with Mother Earth, as well as our human and non-human neighbors.
It is also important for us to offer a labor acknowledgement. With permission granted by Dr. Tara Stewart, we acknowledge that much of what we know of this country today, including its culture, economic growth, and development, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their ascendants, who suffered the horror of transatlantic trafficking, slavery, and Jim Crow laws. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we acknowledge the tremors of that violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can still be felt and witnessed today.
Another part of creating beloved community is fostering a sense of belonging. So we invite you to update your name in Zoom to include your pronouns. This is just one more way we can express welcome for all of God's children. And at any point during these gatherings, you may access, captions options in the Zoom menu on your device. It might also show as an icon with the letters CC in a box. You may need to click on 3 little dots or swipe to a different screen within Zoom to access this option.
So we'll continue our work toward healing and justice by entering into a place of peace and listening together. I invite you to take a deep breath with me. Through these regular gatherings, we've developed a covenant of how we enter and interact in this space. We're committed to creating a safer and a braver space where each of us are able to bring the truth of who we are and how we're doing. If you share something today that you wish for us to edit out of the recording, just let us know afterwards. And with all of this said, we affirm these conversations are meant to be an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ, the beloved community.
And as Bell Hooks wrote in All About Love, rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion. Today and every second Wednesday of 2025, we will journey with Indigenous author, Vine Delory Jr., and engage with Custer Died for Your Sins and Indian Manifesto. A reminder about our journey together, we are all learning from this Indigenous elder through his writing. So Solveig and I are not teaching, we are just facilitators of this space each month.
And so as we've been doing every month, we begin our reading circle with this context from the last paragraph of the preface. But the Indian task of keeping an informed public available to assist the tribes in their efforts to survive is never ending. And so the central message of this book, that Indians are alive, have certain dreams of their own, and are being overrun by the ignorance and the mistaken, misdirected efforts of those who would help them can never be repeated too often. So we will be reminded of our covenant that we've been practicing for almost a year now. Wow, what a gift that is. In this space where we are sharing both from our head and our heart. Very important. That's a lifelong journey of keeping those connected or connecting them when they're disconnected. And so we can practice here today to share from our head and our heart. We practice awareness of space and time. And so step up or step back, take space. If you've got something to share, take it. And also step back and make space for others to share fully. And just remember that we are always, always, always learning, and that is the point. So, as has been our practice, we will take the next 5 minutes or so to populate the chat with quotes that were particularly meaningful, agitational, insightful, that we want to share with the group. And make sure to just put in also the page number. And then in about 5 minutes or so, we'll begin by inviting whoever put that quote in to read it out loud in your own voice. And then the conversation will follow. Oh, and remember, we're on chapter 10. It goes along with the month. That's how I can remember.
I just noticed our time. That's been way more than 5 minutes. There's so much in this chapter.
There's
Are we
so much.
no? Are we at a place we want to begin reading?
Who's first?
Does that feel okay? I'm scrolling up. Ooh, yeah, there's a lot. Tammy, looks like you might be first.
From page 225, rarely does anyone ask an Indian what he thinks of the modern world.
Same for me.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Sunny.
Go ahead. Okay. Classifying the corporation as the tribe takes a little reorientation for most Americans because they are so quick to judge by outward appearance. Rarely do they meditate on how something really operates. Instead, they want to believe that because something is shiny and appears new, it is new. That was page 229.
Society today has largely drifted away from accomplishments. Concern is focused instead on image.
Mhm.
The person appears to be, not what they are.
Ditto.
Oh, I just noticed that we have the same one back to back.
And the next one is mine, a ditto to Tammy.
From page 233 and 234, tribal existence has always been predicated upon a land base, a homeland, within which tribal existence could take place. Once landless, a people must fall back upon religion, social values, or political power.
Then from page 226, when an Indian considers the modern world, however, he sees it being inevitably drawn into social structures in which tribalism appears to be the only valid form of supra-individual participation. The humor becomes apparent when the Indian realizes that if he simply steps to the sidelines and watches the rat race go past him, soon people will be coming to him to advise him to return to tribalism. It appears to many Indians that someday soon the modern world will be ready to understand itself and perhaps the Indian people.
Okay, this chapter was a huge surprise for me. I love the comparison between tribalism and corporations. The quote on page 228, but in the corporation, man was offered a tribal existence of security and ease. And then numerous examples of this are lifted up throughout the chapter. Page 229, fulfillment with limits, and then page individual fulfillment with limits is what was quoted. And then 230 reinforces a beneficial individual life with programs formed around those left out of corporate existence or tribal existence. You just want to go, duh.
But see, and further down, I just have a lot of questions in this chapter about that comparison today. Would that be true? I don't think hardly any of the things stated in there about the, tribalism and corporation could be said to be true in our time today. Maybe they were when he wrote the book. But I just have question marks all over this chapter.
Can I add something or should we keep
I'm
going on?
sorry, I interrupted too. I just didn't know if it was time to start that or not.
Well, we can circle back to that, but I'm going to put a little pin in that piece because I think it's probably come up in other quotes too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so I'm guessing my next one connects too, and that's the whole point of all this, right? So from page 228, the corporation forms the closest attempt of the white man to socialize his individualism and become a tribal man.
I also appreciate how Deloria calls out pilgrimish individualism. I keep wanting to say piggish, which we could say a lot there, right? And compares it to corporate tribalism.
So is that denigrating pigs?
Whoa.
Hey, I was
I grew up
born
in
the year of
Iowa
the
and I dated a
pig.
pig farmer, so I'm a fan of pig.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pigs are good. People were born the year of the pig.
Yeah, so this most of my quotes are just similar to what somebody said earlier, just like this chapter just sort of blew my many assumptions sort of out of the water. With the passage of the 1968 Civil Rights Act, Indian tribes fell victim to the Bill of Rights. The stage is now set for total erosion of traditional customs by sterile codes devised by the white man. Some tribes are now fighting to get the law amended because the law allows reliance on traditional Indian solutions only to the extent that they do not conflict with state and federal laws.
Nationalists always have the option of resorting to violence in demonstrations. Militants shoot their arsenal merely to attract attention and are left without any visible means to accomplish their goals. That was page 241.
And going back to page 229. Classifying the corporation as the tribe takes a little reorientation for most Americans because they are so quick to judge by outward appearances. Rarely do they meditate on how something really operates. Instead, they want to believe that because something is shiny and appears new, it is new.
The history of America has shown the gradual replacement of custom and common law with regulatory statutes and programs, so that law today is more a case of legalizing certain types of behavior and penalizing other types of behavior. We are just passing through the most radical period of law as a confining instrument of social control. Page 236.
They thought so. Yeah, I've already commented on mine, so go ahead. I think it's Jill.
Yeah. The awareness of page 231, the quote, the awareness of contemporary clubs and how they bring warfare to the individuals of a community. That's on the middle of that page. It was just very telling about family values and so forth.
And I couldn't quote it because the chapter just disturbed me. Seeing the corporations as a tribe when it's really a few people that control the corporation. I mean, if you got stockholders, they control it. That it isn't the group. They don't look out for the group's interests. I just found the whole thing disturbing.
Noted from page 230, it would appear then that we are witnessing the gradual tribalization of the white man as his economic tribes become more and more oriented toward social services for their members. What is now needed is the frank admittance by the white man that he is tribalizing and the acknowledgement that his tribalism will gradually replace government as we now know it, submerging the differentiated society into a number of related economic social units. And then I also had from page 236, I wanted to put like most of the chapter up here. The history of America has shown the gradual replacement of custom and common law with regulatory statutes and programs. I think that's what Tammy read a while ago. So that the law today is more a case of legalizing certain types of behavior and penalizing other types of behavior. And then, yeah, about the most radical period of law. And I kind of giggled thinking like, oh. Yeah.
Not funny, but
It's startling though, isn't it? Page 232 and 233, I just was like, let's hear it for the hippies, right? Like they were on the track and their downfall was when the clans failed to institute customs that would be replicated to meet specific needs and solve problems. I just was like, let's hear it for the hippies.
Let's see here. But yes, but this is where hippies like kind of got it wrong. But it blew my, but it kind of blew my circuits because I was like, wait, this sort of goes against, okay, anyway, but then anyway, it's amazing. It seemed ridiculous to Indian people that hippies would refuse to incorporate prestige and social status into their tribalizing attempts. Indian society is founded on status and social prestige. This largely reduces competition to interpersonal relationships instead of allowing it to run rampant in economic circles. Were competition to be confined to economic concerns, which it is in our culture, the white conception of a person as a part of the production machine would take hold, destroying the necessary value of humans in their social sense.
And I don't want to read the whole thing, but there's so much from page 240 and 241 around education. Education must also be revamped, not to make Indians more acceptable to white society, but to allow non-Indians a greater chance to develop their talents. Education as is designed today works to destroy communities by creating supermen who spend their lives climbing the economic ladder. America is thus always on the move, and neighborhoods rarely have a stable, lasting residency. In the future, minority groups must emphasize what they share with the white society, not what keeps them apart. And then just skipping a little bit, intensity turns easily to violence when it has no traditions and customs to channel it into constructive paths of behavior.
So Jason, I maybe was just too slow in putting my quote up from page 233 because it kind of set the table for what Jason just talked about. So Deloria lifts up that wealth and education in an Indian tribe was seen as beneficial only if it was supporting the wider community in some way. Otherwise, it was viewed as selfish and not tolerated, I would imagine.
From page 228. In the corporation, man was offered a tribal existence of security and ease.
And finally, I'm just going to shift the gender, although I think it's probably a little bit more true to keep it in the male gender. But anyway, we'll just shift it up a little bit. With competition confined within social events, each woman must be judged according to her real self, not according to her wealth or educational prowess. Hence, a great holder of wealth is merely selfish, unless she has other redeeming qualities besides her material goods. Dang, everybody. That's quite a chapter.
One thing that occurs to me is that if we were to think of not of corporations in the organized sense that we think of them now as they are now, but more as cooperatives, it fits better.
Can you say some more?
I was going to say more about that because I'm probably thinking co-op more like a tribe. So say more, please.
Well, that's what I was getting at, was that he refers to them as corporations, but I'm not sure that he meant corporations like they are now. What corporations have devolved into is different from how they started. And they started, I believe, more like what we now would call cooperatives.
I think that's true to a certain extent. And so this book was written in the 60s. And in 1971, Lewis Powell, who would become a Supreme Court judge, wrote this memo that essentially he was at Harvard Business School at that point, essentially totally shifted the mentality and the purpose of corporations. And the memo was called Attack on American Free Enterprise System. So basically, corporations felt under attack by people like labor unions, right? People want, pushing for corporations to be more accountable, right? And they were accountable to a certain extent. And the move was, hey, let's make them more accountable to be able to respond better to our whole culture. Well, they organized and said, no way in hell. In fact, we're gonna run a counter attack against them. And one of those, and that's literally how we got to today. And one of the shifts was that that the corporation had legal responsibility to respond to the shareholders first and everyone else second. And that was not true before that.
I did find it fascinating through this lens, though, because now I'm thinking about literally every single place that people congregate, whether it's a structure or not, as like, oh, we've been trying to get back to tribalism and we're doing it every other way possible. And thwarting it and like doing it sideways and versus just going back to tribes and clans. And like, I don't know, just as I was thinking about like all the ways we gather in today's world, but we create so much like structure around them.
One of the commentaries that I read says, talking about what did Deloria mean by the word corporation. And this commentary says Deloria saw the corporation as a way for Westerners to create a sense of community similar to the communal bonds of a tribe. However, he argued that this corporate socialization was superficial, as it did not require the deep inherent social responsibility found in tribal society. And then another one went on to add the term kinship. So Sylvia, not that this is about making you feel better, but in some ways it is. I'm hoping that this is reshaping how you are receiving this information, because I think that Deloria is pointing to this and saying there have been steps, there have been attempts, just what Jason said, but it falls apart because when you get down to it, white people continually were going back to the pilgrim ways of individualism and looking out for what's best for me first. And then if some other things are left over and it helps the wider community, okay. And that's not caring for the tribe.
No, I understood that he was looking at corporations different. It was a different time, but why did the unions and all that develop first? I just question if it was ever really a tribal, even in that time, and probably was more so than today. And then part of my being disturbed is that we're at a point where the corporations is like doing they're the ones controlling. I mean, we as people have to gather together to whatever boycott, to have a voice, but that's why it was hitting such a nerve. But I would question if it was ever truly there. Because we started this country kind of, I mean, there was community to survive, but once we got beyond survival, we became rugged individuals.
I suggest that it was possibly quite a bit more true for white men than it was for poor people, women, non-white, etc.
I mean, it's the boys club concept, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, to me, like I think to Sylvia's point, like they were trying to create a tribe, but they were missing huge pieces, including huge pieces of the tribe, like other people besides white straight men. And yeah, putting like I think he references as like making it just economic. And so then you're missing other like large pieces of what a tribe consists of, at least through the native lens, is my understanding.
Well, and I think that's where the part two about shiny and new comes
Mhm.
to play with that. I was thinking about adaptive challenges versus tweaking the technical. And we keep trying to tweak, and then we want to call it new and shiny and innovative and blah, blah, blah. But the piece we're missing is back to the values part of that. So that abstract challenge or adaptive challenge, trying to think about what's the whole picture of this thing and what is it we're trying to do rather than just a Band-Aid fix. Something that looks new, we can say, oh, we've reorganized. And it's like, no, you haven't. You just put new titles on people's jobs or whatever it might be. But we haven't really gone back to say, what is it? What are our goals? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? What does it mean for us? I think that really impacts us as church. What is it we're trying to do? Are we trying to be a club or are we trying to be church?
Yes.
Well, that connects with what the quote that Alice put in about if you don't have a land base, like if you're a people that are disconnected from a place, and it doesn't mean that we can't be connected, even if this is not our homeland, right? But to the extent that you're not connected to a land base where you literally have an investment in doing things so that this land is regenerative, right? Then what it says, you have to fall back on religion, social values, or political power. Like you just have, because you have to have some structure, some meaning, right? Some meaning. And that's been bugging me about Christianity for a long time. like what is, why do we have to work so hard to find meaning in life, to like impose like our language and all just, stuff to give people structure and meaning? Like, why do we have to work so hard to do that? And I think it's just pointing to this, like, because we're not connected to the land. We're not connected to that, to where we live and the people who are here. And one person who has really helped open that up for me a little bit is Ched Myers, and he coined it's not just the term, it's a way of being Christian, of watershed discipleship. So really like thinking of, and what he meant by watershed was like 3 different ways. Like we are people of faith, we're Christians in a watershed, in a particular place. And so how we do faith and religion has to be connected to that place. And then also watershed discipleship is like that part of our journey is to learn from this water, to be disciples of the watershed, to be learning from the place where we live. But that to me, that's the kind of the closest thing that I've encountered. Well, I guess the Wild Church Network and what I tried to do with the Wilderness Way community for 11 years is that if we're not wedded to a land, to even just the place where we are, it doesn't matter where we came from, I think we're always going to be lost.
Jesus wasn't wedded to land, so how does that connect?
Well, think about what he tried to do though, in
I
multiple.
mean, he had a community that looked out for the benefit. So I question whether there needs to be that connection with the land, maybe a connection to the community within. And I mean, I value the connection with creation. I don't know. That's what I kept on thinking back. Like Jesus wasn't tribal in that way. He was moving from place to place.
Is part of being connected to the land though, even if I don't have it, if I have the heritage?
Mm.
I mean, so we have Jesus with the heritage of this is the land of my father, this is, Abraham, blah, 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 blah. I wonder how that plays in for us when I think about I might be a renter. I may not own my property, I may not own my house, but if I have that grounding, but yeah, oftentimes it does. I mean, look at all of our battles are always about land. From a Native community to what we see in Israel right now. So yeah.
Well, it would be a valuing of the land that you're on. I mean, I'm a renter, but I treat my house as if it was mine, that I owned it, care for it in that way.
So I wonder how much, I guess, what's running through my head is how we as church seem to be striving to be the corporation. Come to our church, we have a fancier building. We have a dynamite pastor that's charismatic or whatever all of those things are. And I'm guilty of that too. I know there's times when I just want to be organizationally systems driven. And then I have to stop and say that job description may not be as nearly as important as I think it is. Do we know what we're trying to do?
I'm the chair of a transition team where we're looking to call a pastor down the road, and we're getting feedback from the congregation as to why it should take as long as we're anticipating, because in the corporation you can hire somebody and it's kind of like, what about the church are you not getting? I mean, obviously you're not hearing what call is versus hiring. And I mean, there's just so much that causes red flags for me to say that this, if this is the mentality of the folks in the pew, then we've got this corporate kind of lens in not only in the way in which we structure our church, but also in the way in which we live our faith.
That's why we chose to get rid of our property to do ministry in a new way. But it's not easy.
Well, and then you have
a lot of what I've been dealing with the church structure and dealing with racism has been because of the church's corporation.
And for my church, it's kind of the opposite. We couldn't do the ministry that we're called to do without the building and the land, because we're about service and hospitality, and those are things that weren't going to work without having the building. So we went the other way and don't have a pastor, which is complicated, but
No, I guess so.
Well, we did, because it was one or the other.
Well, I take that a little personal, but what for
I
parenting.
know.
Well, I mean, but the ministry is the focus. If the building is the focus and the ministry, then you're trying to gather your money to support the building. But if you have a building that you're supporting the ministry, that you need it for the ministry, it's the
Yeah,
way.
but
That's
that's not it. It's not about supporting the building. It's about supporting the
no, I
people
mean,
of the
it's that you're
neighborhood.
using the building as part of your ministry. You don't have the building as your focus. You're using it as a resource. So
Yes,
often,
we are using it as a resource.
yeah, that's what I meant. Even
And
if I wasn't saying
and
it right.
that's why we needed to have it to be able to be in that neighborhood. We couldn't do it as a house church. It was not feasible. We couldn't serve dinner every week to 50 people
Yeah.
with
No, I wasn't being critical of that, is what I'm saying.
I see.
We actually do joint services with the Episcopal Church, so we use a building, but we didn't feel like for our ministry it was going to serve our purpose.
Yeah, and actually this points out what somebody said earlier about doing ministry in a specific context. It didn't work for you in your context, and it would doing what you're doing couldn't work for us in our context because we don't have another Christian congregation within a mile in any direction. So, yeah, it's important. Land is important in either direction, in either way. It's fascinating.
When I think that's where it really comes to play is, do we know the why? No, I mean, because we can look at the whole call process and say, as Tammy's saying, this is important. It's not about hiring. We're not going to just go out and get the quickest person we can get to be our executive director. And at the same time, think about how many layers we have of corporate rules, regulations. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to pray for 3 months before we'll let you talk to anybody. So then we flip. So it's that challenge of that. What are we really trying to do? And have we lost sight of that purpose? Which is a really fine line, tightrope to be trying to balance on. But I think that's a piece too that we as church are trying to say we're willing to walk that line. We're willing to ask those questions, or we should be.
I think, Jill, your comment's really an interesting one, to think of the commandments that way, to stay in relationship, but while on the move. How do we, as we sort all these pieces out, continue in relationship as we make these hard decisions, like, Sylvia and Elise, you and Tammy, that kind of, everybody's had to make, but stay in relationship. That's interesting when you think of it that way too. Thanks,
That
Vic.
that goes back to my confirmation teacher teaching us that the Israelites were being taken out of a social framework in Egypt and going into the wilderness, and God had the foresight to think, we need some sort of framework here so the wheels don't come completely off. And so here's a social contract of how we will be together. But to the point that I hear everyone making, and Sunny said it very explicitly, the why you're doing this behavior is important and makes us distinctly different from just a social services club. We may be doing and supporting some of the very same things, but why we do it is our call to be disciples of Jesus Christ and to follow that example. And there are different, I'd like to think that there's different energy that comes with that when it's focused on that sacrificial love of Jesus. Not certain that we always follow through with that, but that's the theory.
I would love to have seen what this chapter would look like if he had written it today.
I feel like we have just scratched the surface on this chapter. Oh my gosh, there's so much.
Yeah.
And we are almost at time. And so I'm just going to do a quick, if you have a powerful learning that you want to share, just a word or a phrase. And then we've got a lot of announcements about things coming up that might be very interesting to all of us. So want to have a few minutes, more than a few minutes to be able to do that. But yeah, I think I'll just say, I just feel like this chapter just really, it blew my mind in many really good ways. A lot of assumptions, and I'm grateful for that.
I'm kind of struck by how language takes us on a journey that maybe is confusing. So we talked about corporation and Alice, what is it?
Cooperative.
Cooperative. Sorry. Anyway, but just thinking about, had we been able to maybe switch those words, how language just in these number of years has taken us into a whole different kind of place than had we maybe used a different phrase for corporation.
I just go back to the very first page. I think several of us put the comment at the end, everywhere in Indian is deluged with offers, but rarely does anyone ask what the Indian thinks about it. And just not just for Indigenous people, but everything. I mean, are we curious? Are we loving enough to think that others have something to offer us? And do we miss out because we don't ask? I mean, we miss out big time on some of the greatest gifts and gifted people. So that just, I mean, I know the corporate piece, yes, but that very first line is just one I always try to remember in other categories and ways too.
Like that connects well. Jill, will you read yours aloud? That's a great follow-up to what Shirlene just shared.
Yeah, so I have to find it now. My learning, and this is not new, but a wonderful reminder, everything that we are, do, and have is called to be put into service for the benefit of all, not just us as individuals.
Anyone else? Last powerful nugget you want to name?
I'll just ditto everyone.
Yeah. Totally.
And just say again, which, you invited us in the beginning to be in conversation, and we have. And I mean, I haven't been as part of it as often as many, but this is an opportunity to listen to one another, to ask the questions, and to walk away with something. Oh, I didn't think about that. So thank you for helping me think about that.
Like that's a great lead into our closing part. Thank you, Shirlene. So thank you all for actively creating beloved community with us in this space, with an objective of healing together. Takes each of us and all of us I invite you to check the ELCA coaching event pages, and Solveig's going to put some links in the chat while I describe all these for some additional learning opportunities, several of which have just been added recently. So we sent out an email the end of September about October events, and then we got notices about several more events. So they're not in that email if you get on our email. So I'd like to highlight several that I think will be interest to you in this reading circle and those watching the recording. The first is a two-part series from our friends at the United Church of Christ called Mental Health, Spiritual Care, and Community Healing, an Introduction to Internal Family Systems Approach. The part 1 is starting this afternoon, and part 2 will be next Wednesday, October 15th. This month is the final offering of the Moving Toward Right Relations training in 2 modules hosted by the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. Module 1 is this evening. Module 2 is next Saturday, October 18th. Comrades Education just started a Fundamentals of Anti-Racism online course and White Racial Caucus, and their second session is this coming Monday, October 13th. ELCA Coaching is piloting this next event with Ridgeview Coaching called Flourishing in Life and Ministry, a 2-part program for faith leaders and coaches. Part 1 will be this coming Tuesday, October 14th. Part 2 will be in November, so you got plenty of time for that one. Next Wednesday, you're welcome to join us back in this created beloved community space for Nobody Journeys Alone. But wait, there's more. Comrades Education is also hosting Building Relations with Land and Sky, a land connection journaling practice for fostering decolonial connection to your local biosphere. Their next cohort starts Sunday, October 19th. ELCA Coaching is collaborating with Reconciling Works to host Let's Talk Sogi on Monday, October 20th. The Coalition to Dismantle Doctrine of Discovery is hosting their next decolonizing worship gathering on Friday, October 31st. There's a lot. And then finally, we have our next reading circle, which is on the final chapter, chapter 12, the second Wednesday in November, which is also the 12th of the month. Yeah. Come to any or all or none, whatever resonates with you. Solveig, back to you.
What is SOGI?
Jill, do you remember what it stands for? If not, I can look it up real quick.
I do. I am terrible with acronyms.
I
But
got you.
okay.
It is learning more about sex, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation.
And it's wonderful. This will be like my 3rd or 4th time through it.
Cool. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions about any of those offerings?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Since there are 11 chapters, do we have a plan for December?
Yes, we're going to talk about what's next.
Okay. Just need to make sure my calendar is up to date.
Yeah.
Yes.
Same time,
Please
same
show up.
place. On the second Wednesday of December. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody for coming and just sharing from your head and your heart together. So grateful for this learning circle. As you leave here today, please remember that you are seen, you are valued, you are loved.
Amen.
So were you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye, friends.
Bye, friends. Take good care.